Hello, Journey friends. Welcome back to this week's Along the Journey. Now, I know Journey members, you guys are thinkers. You like the difficult, deep questions to contemplate and then discuss. You know, questions to me like the speed of light. How do you see that? How do you measure it? Who came up with the speed of light? The dreams. How do dreams occur? What's going on inside of there? If you fall and you hit the ground, what happens? Deep questions about that. This week, we're looking at one of the deepest questions, the question of the origin of the universe. In other words, how did we go from that to that, just like that? Well, as you know, we are in this section where we're looking at worldview, and the way that question is answered is really dependent on our worldview, if it is biblical worldview or whether it is a secular worldview based primarily on naturalism. And if you think about the origin of the universe, we obviously would say it's very clear that it screams creator, designer. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning God created the heavens and earth. And so we're very clear with that. But we don't have to shy away from the conversations relative to science and philosophers about this. They've done a good job setting the table for us. In other words, in the 18th century, the Great Enlightenment, when faith and reason started to be separated from one another. Prior to that, faith was reason and reason was faith. But as part of this Great Enlightenment, they started to say, look, nature is all there has been, it is, and will ever be. So the origin of the universe must have had some sort of natural phenomena. And so what we have determined is that it has had an eternal existence, that the universe always has been and always will be. Well, by the 20th century, thanks in no small part to Albert Einstein and his theory of general relativity, which they basically would say, okay, we missed that one, but no, now we've got it. Well, his theory of general relativity would say that the universe is always expanding. Astronomers and all agree that when you observe the universe, the lights, the traces, the stars, the galaxies are moving away from us constantly, that there is an expansion of the universe. And you couple that with the first two laws of thermodynamics, the first law being that matter cannot be created or destroyed, and the second law being really the law of entropy, that we are in a constant state of decay. Well, you start to think, how does that work with origin? Because if we're in a constant state of decay, just like the expanded universe, it was wound up at one point. There was a time for which there was no decay for it to begin decaying. If it's expanding, there was a time for which it had started, an origin to begin that expansion. And then when you say, well, how can it be natural if matter cannot create itself? That's the first law of thermodynamics. And so at the end of the day, it's inescapable that the origin of the universe cannot be explained by natural causes, that they must be supernatural in nature, and then it becomes just a degree of how do you explain the supernatural? Well, this week, we're going to be looking at the Blue Year, Section 5, Unit 2, the origin of the universe. That's right, Blue Year, Section 5, Unit 2. Before the design, there was a designer. And you know, this week's got a lot of wonderful material. In fact, one of the books I highly recommend for supplementing this material is The Case for the Creator. Wonderful, wonderful book. I did about a 12-week study class on it many years ago. And some of this information at great depths, but yet with a very high level, easy to understand, but just wonderful evidence to the origin of the universe and more. So think about that. That's one of the Lee Strobel books as well. But your three key points this week as we look at the origin of the universe is definitely in truth. Truth, truth, truth. Get familiar with this idea. Be able to speak to it with great confidence. It's the language and the lingo of those who profess that God was not a designer and creator of the universe. And so be able to speak that with them, because now there's really just a few options. Either because nature could not create nature, thermal law of dynamics, matter could not be created, then there was something that supernaturally happened, and the option is it didn't involve God. That there was an intelligent designer, there was a deity or not a deity, but there is no longer a deity. That's an option that's out there. Some still hold to an expansion and contraction theory, but yet that doesn't get around the idea that matter was never created, and that the general relativity law says that it's always expanding. So a lot of great contradiction there. And of course, we are left with the idea that the universe has been created and designed. In the beginning, God. And ultimately, as we look at this material, what we're seeing is found in Romans 1:23, I believe, is that for those who deny his creation, that he was the creator and designer, they have denied and refused to give God the glory that he is due. That there is the unmistakable marks of his design and his proof. The fine-tuning of the universe is a marvel to scientists. And so those are the reasons why that because of this fixed beginning, all matter, energy, time, space, all the physical laws that rely on those came into being by the power of an intelligent designer. And that designer is God. Well, that's number one. Number two this week, if you look at it, equipping. You know, I haven't really challenged you to make sure that you're looking at this process of learning the canon of Scripture, the biblical books, in order to turn to them, in order to understand the order that has been presented to ourselves. But, you know, talk about the Old Testament. We're in the Old Testament now, and this week is the 12 historical books. So you're going to be looking at Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and then you're going to look at those pairs of books that are reverse alphabetical, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and then you're going to see Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. And so make sure you know those in order, that we can go to them and just a general idea of what you find in each of those biblical books. And then the third key point this week, really critical and a great instruction, maybe to practice, is how to introduce conversation about God to an unbeliever. You know, I have found that to walk up and really to say, hey, I'm a Christian, why aren't you? Or I'm a Christian, here's how you become one. That's great. If that works for you, that's fine. But I'm a believer that there's a relational component in drawing near and enabling someone to draw nearer to God, to understand their current position relative to matters of faith or spiritual matters. And so this week really talks through some ideas of how to engage others in those conversations, to build relationships. The origin of the universe, what a great place to start in conversation. But then, you know, really quickly they ask you these questions, you know, do you have interest in spiritual things? How would you describe your spiritual journey so far? Have you heard about the answer that explains some of these questions about my faith? What a great non-intimidating way to begin that conversation and to come alongside someone. So look at that in the mission section this week. And so, friends, I hope you have wonderful conversations on these very deep and important matters. And then you can begin to work on the deep question of, why does all the hair keep falling out of the back of my head? It was up there yesterday. Blessings, friends. Have a great week.